The crack of Vincent's palm against Marvin's face shattered the anniversary gala like breaking glass. Marvin's body twisted mid-fall, his Omega reflexes screaming to tuck and roll, to turn the momentum into a counterstrike, but he forced himself to collapse. His hips struck the white marble with brutal finality, his head snapping back, crimson blooming from his split lip onto the floor. 200 shareholders, board members, and society elites froze, crystal champagne flutes hovering mid-toast. Vincent Kim, Alpha CEO, billion-dollar empire builder, stood over his husband with his fist still clenched, his expression carved from contempt. "Clumsy Omega," he said, loud enough for the back rows to hear. "I don't know why I keep you." Beside him, Dante, Vincent's assistant, always too close, always watching, smiled like a snake tasting blood. An hour ago, he'd whispered poison. Marvin spilled wine on the Henderson contract. Deliberately. He's trying to sabotage you. It was a lie. Dante had bumped Marvin's arm himself. But Vincent never questioned his right-hand man. Marvin's body betrayed him. Not with weakness, with restraint so violent it felt like dying. His fingers curled against the marble, muscle memory mapping 17 pressure points on Vincent's exposed throat. 3 seconds. That's all it would take. Redirect the Alpha's weight, strike the solar plexus, collapse the trachea before he could even scent the danger. The phantom memory of Master Li's voice cut through his mind like a blade. "Survive, little phoenix. Hide or let the silent phoenix die with us." Smoke. Screams. 7 years ago, Chen Zhao's men had turned the temple into a graveyard. Marvin was the only one who walked away. "Get up," Vincent hissed. "And clean this mess. On your knees." The crowd's whispers slithered across Marvin's skin. "Omega trash, why doesn't he just leave? So pathetic he can't even stand properly." Marvin rose slowly, trembling, not from submission, but from the sheer force of not breaking his husband's spine. He kept his eyes down, his scent deliberately sweetened with manufactured fear, playing the broken Omega they all expected. But as he reached for the napkins, something caught his peripheral vision. A new server by the champagne fountain. Black lotus tattoo on his wrist. Chen Zhao's signature. The hunt had found him. The napkins felt like sandpaper against Marvin's split lip. He knelt on the marble floor, his Omega instincts warring with 7 years of kung fu discipline, one screaming submit, the other whispering strike. He chose neither. He simply dabbed at the wine stain spreading across the white tile like a blood stain, his movements slow and deliberate, the perfect picture of a chastised spouse. Above him, Vincent had already moved on. His laugh rang out across the penthouse ballroom, easy and charming, the same laugh that had once made Marvin believe this marriage might be bearable. "You know how Omegas are during their suppression cycles," Vincent said to the cluster of Alphas near the bar. "Emotional. Clumsy. I should have scheduled this gala for next week, but business waits for no one." Murmurs of agreement. Sympathetic nods. One Alpha, Harrison Lee from the Seoul branch, clapped Vincent on the shoulder. "You're more patient than I'd be, Kim. My Omega knows better than to embarrass me in public." "It's called discipline," Vincent replied, swirling his whiskey. "Omegas need structure. Boundaries. It's in their biology. If I let Marvin's behavior slide, what kind of husband would I be? The kind who doesn't understand that biology and brutality aren't the same thing," Marvin thought. But he kept his head down, kept scrubbing. "Alpha discipline," Dante chimed in from Vincent's elbow, his voice smooth as silk and twice as suffocating. "It's a lost art. Too many modern Alphas coddle their Omegas, and then they wonder why their households fall apart." More nods. More agreement. The shareholders loved this narrative, the strong Alpha keeping order, the weak Omega learning his place. It fit their worldview like a tailored suit. Marvin's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed harder against the marble, and for a fraction of a second, the tile beneath his palm spiderwebbed with hairline cracks. He froze, horror spiking through him. Control. Control. He shifted his weight, covering the damage with his body, praying no one had noticed. "Marvin." Vincent's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Are you finished?" "Yes, Alpha." The words tasted like ash, but Marvin had perfected the submissive tone years ago. He gathered the stained napkins, rose slowly to his feet, and kept his gaze locked on the floor. His lip throbbed. His hip would bruise. But pain was temporary. Discovery was fatal. Vincent stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating in its intensity. He gripped Marvin's chin, forcing his head up, his thumb pressing against the split lip hard enough to make fresh blood well. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Marvin obeyed. He met his husband's eyes, cold, calculating, utterly devoid of remorse, and felt the familiar dual sensation, his Omega biology urging him to bare his throat, and his warrior training mapping the exact angle to break Vincent's wrist. "You made me look weak tonight," Vincent said quietly, his voice pitched low so only Marvin could hear. "In front of the Henderson group. In front of the board. Do you understand what that costs me?" "I'm sorry," Marvin whispered. His eyes began to fill with tears, real ones this time, born not from fear but from the suffocating weight of living this lie. "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to." Vincent released his chin with a dismissive flick. "Go to the bedroom. I don't want to see you for the rest of the night." Marvin bowed his head, clutching the stained napkins like a lifeline. He turned toward the hallway, his footsteps measured, his shoulders curved in submission. The crowd parted for him, their whispers following like hungry ghosts. "Poor thing looks half dead. I heard he was pretty once, before the marriage. Weak genetics. My cousin's Omega could at least manage a dinner party without falling apart." Marvin's hands trembled. Not from shame. From rage so pure it turned his vision white at the edges. He was 3 steps from the hallway when it happened. A server moved through the crowd, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. Young. Unfamiliar. And on his right wrist, just visible beneath his white sleeve, a tattoo, a black lotus, its petals curled like reaching fingers. Marvin's body reacted before his mind could catch up. His eyes snapped to the server's face, cataloging features with lethal precision: sharp cheekbones, a scar above his left eyebrow, the way he moved with a fighter's balance. Chen Zhao's mark. Chen Zhao's man. For one heartbeat, Marvin's mask shattered completely. His pupils dilated. His stance shifted, weight dropping to the balls of his feet, his center of gravity lowering into a defensive crouch. His hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where a blade would have rested 7 years ago. Every line of his body transformed from hunched Omega to coiled predator, his scent turning sharp and dangerous, ozone and adrenaline instead of the sweet fear he'd been projecting. The server's eyes widened. Recognition flickered across his face. No. Marvin caught himself. It took every ounce of control Master Li had beaten into him, but he forced his body to crumple, to collapse against the wall as if the emotional strain had overwhelmed him. He let out a broken sob, covering the killing intent with theatrical fragility. "I'm sorry," he gasped, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I'm so sorry, I need to lie down." Concerned murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone called for Vincent. Marvin didn't wait. He stumbled down the hallway toward the bedroom, his performance perfect, his heart hammering against his ribs. But he'd seen the server's face. And worse, the server had seen his. The hunt had truly begun. The bedroom was a gilded cage, all white silk and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Marvin locked the door behind him and stumbled to the bathroom, his hands shaking as he gripped the marble sink. His reflection stared back, split lip, bruise blooming across his left cheekbone, eyes rimmed with carefully manufactured tears. Pathetic, Vincent had called him. The word echoed in his skull. Marvin twisted the faucet, letting cold water run over his knuckles. Knuckles that had shattered concrete blocks. Knuckles that had learned the 72 strikes before his 16th birthday. Now they trembled as he reached for the pill bottle hidden behind his expensive Omega skincare products, heat suppressants, the kind that turned his biology into a chemical battlefield. He dry swallowed 2 pills, wincing as they scraped down his throat. The label warned, "Take with food. May cause nausea, dizziness, hormonal imbalance." He'd been taking double doses for 7 years. His body had stopped warning him about the side effects and started simply punishing him. Constant low-grade nausea, joints that ached like he was twice his age, a sense so artificially muted that other Omegas avoided him at social functions. But it was necessary. Omegas in heat were vulnerable. Distracted. And Marvin couldn't afford either. He splashed water on his face, careful to avoid the split lip, and forced himself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Master Lee's meditation technique, designed to calm the spirit before dawn training. Now Marvin used it to survive dinner parties. This wasn't the first time Vincent had struck him. It wasn't even the worst. 3 weeks ago, at the mayor's charity auction, Marvin had accidentally interrupted Vincent's conversation with a foreign investor. The slap had come later, in the car ride home, followed by Vincent's hand fisting in his hair as he hissed, "When alphas are talking, omegas wait. This is basic hierarchy, Marvin. Why can't you learn?" 2 months before that, at a private dinner with the board of directors, Dante had accidentally knocked Marvin's chair as he stood to refill water glasses. Marvin had stumbled, spilling ice water across the tablecloth. Vincent's response had been swift, a public dressing down that left the other omegas present staring at their plates, grateful it wasn't them. Every business dinner followed the same script. Marvin arrived in expensive tailored clothes that Vincent chose, stood silently at his husband's elbow, smiled when spoken to, and endured the casual cruelty that passed for alpha humor. "Your omega is very delicate, Vincent. Does he eat enough?" "Kim, you should let Marvin speak more. I can barely hear him. I'm surprised you brought him tonight. Isn't he more suited to quieter settings?" And Vincent would laugh, clap his colleagues on the back, and agree. He's decorative, not functional. But he looks good in photographs, doesn't he? Marvin had perfected the art of smiling through humiliation. Of nodding along when alphas discussed omega biology like livestock breeding. Of standing for hours in shoes that pinched while Vincent networked, never complaining, never asking to sit, because obedient omegas didn't make demands. But it was Dante's whispers that cut deepest. The assistant had a gift for finding Marvin alone, in hallways, in coat rooms, in the kitchen during catering setup. His voice would slide into Marvin's ear like a blade between ribs. "You know Vincent only married you for your face, right? Once you start aging, he'll replace you. The investors laugh about you behind Vincent's back. They call you the ghost because you're so forgettable. You should be grateful. Most omegas like you end up in worse situations. At least here you have a roof over your head. Know your place, Marvin. It's the only thing keeping you alive." That last one always made Marvin's hands curl into fists. If only you knew, he thought. If only any of you knew. The memories surfaced unbidden, 7 years ago, in a cramped office that smelled of old paper and desperation. Marvin had sat across from the marriage broker, his ribs still healing from the Temple massacre, his hands bandaged, his new identity papers spread across the desk. The broker, a middle-aged beta woman with sympathetic eyes, had slid Vincent Kim's profile toward him. His wealthy, established, and looking for an omega spouse for social appearances, she'd explained. He won't ask questions about your past. He doesn't want a bondmate, just a presentable partner. Does he know I'm? Marvin had stopped himself. A survivor. A target. A ghost wearing someone else's name. He knows you're an omega in need of protection and financial stability, the broker had said carefully. That's all he cares about. Marvin had stared at Vincent's photograph, sharp features, cold eyes, the kind of alpha who viewed omegas as accessories. Everything in him had screamed to refuse. But behind him, Uncle Han, the only other silent Phoenix survivor, had placed a hand on his shoulder. The underworld has eyes everywhere, Marvin. You need to disappear completely. A marriage contract, a new name, a life so boring no one will look twice, it's the best option. So Marvin had signed. He'd walked into this cage willingly, trading his freedom for survival, his dignity for anonymity. He'd told himself it would be temporary. That once Chen Zhao stopped searching, he could leave. Rebuild. But 7 years had passed, and the door had never opened. A knock shattered his thoughts. Marvin. Vincent's voice, muffled through the door. Not angry now, tired. I'm going to bed. Don't wait up. Translation, don't bother me tonight. Yes, Alpha, Marvin called back, his voice perfectly submissive. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Silence fell. Marvin waited until he heard Vincent's bedroom door close, They'd had separate rooms for 3 years now, another small mercy, before he moved to the window. The Black Lotus server was gone, vanished into the crowd below. But Chen Zhao's message was clear. I found you. Marvin's reflection stared back from the dark glass, a broken Omega in silk pajamas, trembling from suppressant side effects. But beneath the surface, the silent phoenix flexed his claws. The mask was cracking. And soon, Vincent Kim would learn what happened when you mistook stillness for weakness. 3:17 a.m. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the climate control and Vincent's distant snoring from the master suite. Marvin slipped out of bed, his body already awake, already craving movement the way other Omegas craved nesting materials. The private gym occupied the penthouse's eastern wing, a space Vincent used twice a month to maintain appearances, filled with equipment that cost more than most people's cars. Marvin locked the door behind him, disabled the security camera with practiced ease, a trick Uncle Han had taught him, and finally, let the mask fall. His shoulders straightened. His breathing deepened. The trembling Omega dissolved like morning mist, replaced by something older, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. He didn't bother with the treadmill or the weight machines. Instead, he moved to the empty center of the room, barefoot on the padded mats, and began the first form. His body remembered what his mind tried to forget. Feet sliding across the floor in patterns Master Li had drilled into him 10,000 times. Hands cutting through air with precision that could stop a heartbeat. The silent phoenix style was built on contradiction, soft movements hiding explosive power, stillness concealing lethal speed. Perfect for an Omega who needed to survive in a world that mistook gentleness for weakness. Marvin's muscles sang. After hours of forced stillness, of bowing and scraping and playing weak, this was oxygen. He flowed through the second form, then the third, his movements faster now, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. His split lip throbbed but he ignored it. Pain was information. Nothing more. The fourth form required weapons. Marvin retrieved the staff he'd hidden behind the exercise mats. Plain bamboo, unremarkable, the kind of thing Vincent would assume was decorative. In Marvin's hands, it became an extension of his body. He spun it overhead, brought it down in strikes that would shatter bones, swept it low in arcs designed to break knees and ankles. Faster. His master's voice echoed in his memory. A phoenix doesn't lumber. It strikes like fire, beautiful and absolute. Marvin increased his speed. The staff became a blur. His feet barely touched the ground. This was who he really was, not the cowering Omega who apologized for breathing, but the last disciple of a legendary temple, a warrior who'd survived because he'd learned to hide in plain sight. He transitioned into weapons-free combat, his hands and feet moving through attack patterns meant for multiple opponents. Block high, strike low, redirect momentum, exploit openings. His reflection in the mirrored wall showed someone Vincent would never recognize. Eyes blazing with focus, body coiled with controlled violence, scent sharp with adrenaline instead of artificial fear. And then, as always, the memory came. 7 years ago. The silent Phoenix Temple burned. Marvin had been in the meditation hall when the screams started. 23 years old, still learning the advanced forms, still believing the world was a place where honor mattered. He'd run toward the sound, toward his brothers and sisters, toward Master Li. And found hell. Chen Zhao's men had come at midnight. Professional killers, armed with guns and blades, cutting through the temple's defenders like wheat. Marvin had counted 12 disciples dead before Master Li found him, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him toward the hidden passage beneath the shrine. No. Marvin had fought his master's grip, desperate to return, to help. I can fight. Let me. Master Li had struck him. Not hard, but shocking enough to cut through the panic. The old man's face was streaked with blood, his own, someone else's, impossible to tell. Behind him, the temple's main hall collapsed in a shower of sparks. Listen to me, little phoenix. Master Li's voice had been steady despite the chaos. Chen Zhao wants the 5 death touches. He'll torture anyone who remains. You cannot save us. But you can survive. Master, I can't just. You can. You will. The old man had pressed something into Marvin's hand, the temple's jade seal, proof of lineage. Weakness is the greatest disguise, Marvin. The world sees Omegas as prey. Become the prey they expect. Hide behind submission. Behind tears. Behind everything they think you are. I don't understand. You will. Master Li had shoved him toward the passage. Behind them, footsteps thundered. Shouts in Mandarin, "Find the Omega. Chen wants him alive." Master Li had drawn his sword, turning to face the coming darkness. His last words had been barely a whisper, "Survive, little phoenix. Let the fire inside you burn cold and patient. When the time comes, rise from the ashes and show them what they created." The passage door had closed. Marvin had run through tunnels that smelled of earth and ancient stone, his master's screams following him into the dark. He'd emerged 3 miles away, in the forest, alone. The temple had burned until dawn. 23 disciples. 4 masters. 1 Omega survivor. Marvin's staff clattered to the floor, the sound jolting him back to the present. His hands were shaking. Not from exertion, from memory, from rage, from 7 years of swallowing his grief and calling it survival. He sank to his knees on the mat, breathing hard, letting the tears come. Here, in the dark, in the only place he could be himself, he allowed the truth. He was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of Vincent's cruelty. Tired of living as half a person. But Master Li's words still held, survive. So Marvin wiped his eyes, picked up the staff, and continued training. The 5th form. The 6th. The devastating 7th that targeted pressure points with surgical precision. By the time the sky began to lighten, he'd run through all 12 forms twice. His body ached beautifully. His mind felt clear. He returned the staff to its hiding place, reactivated the security camera, and slipped back to his room. In the bathroom, he washed away the sweat, reapplied his suppressant patches, and studied his reflection. The broken Omega stared back. But underneath, the Phoenix waited. And tonight, he'd seen Chen Zhao's mark. The time for rising was coming. Marvin didn't sleep. How could he, knowing Chen Zhao's eyes were on him again? By the time dawn broke over Seoul, he'd mentally catalogued everything about the server. Height, 5 feet 10 inches, weight, 170 pounds, the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the way he'd moved with a fighter's efficiency. And that tattoo, black ink on pale skin, unmistakable even in the gala's dim lighting. The lotus had 5 petals, each one representing a death Chen Zhao had ordered personally. The mark of his inner circle. Vincent left for the office at 7 without speaking to him. Marvin waited until the penthouse door closed before moving. He pulled up the gala's catering company on his laptop, Elysian Events, a high-end service Vincent used for every corporate function. Their website showed a team of 20 servers, all photographed in crisp white uniforms, all carefully vetted. Marvin zoomed in on each face. The scarred man wasn't among them. His stomach dropped. A substitute, then. Someone who'd infiltrated the catering staff specifically for last night. Which meant Chen hadn't just found Marvin's location, he'd found it with enough advance notice to plant an operative. Marvin's hands trembled as he cleared his browser history. 7 years. He'd had 7 years of anonymity, bought with Master Li's death and his own carefully constructed weakness. All of it potentially shattered because someone, somewhere, had made a connection. He needed information. He needed confirmation. He needed Uncle Han. The burner phone was hidden inside a hollowed-out cookbook in the kitchen, The Art of Omega Comfort Foods, a title so perfectly domestic that Vincent had never touched it. Marvin retrieved the device, his fingers moving on muscle memory as he dialed the only number programmed into it. 3 rings. 4. Then a click. Little Phoenix. Uncle Han's voice was gravel and smoke, aged but unbroken. It's early. What's wrong? Marvin's throat tightened. Hearing the familiar address, the nickname Master Li had given him, threatened to crack the composure he'd rebuilt overnight. I saw the mark, he said quietly, moving to the window to watch the street below. Last night. At Vincent's anniversary gala. Chen's lotus. Silence. Then, you're certain? 5 petals. Right wrist. Inner circle. Marvin's eyes tracked a black sedan parked across the street. Had it been there yesterday? He couldn't remember. He was posing as catering staff, but is not on their roster. Uncle, He looked at me. He recognized me. Did you engage? No. Marvin's free hand clenched against the glass. I slipped. For maybe 2 seconds. My stance changed. But I covered it. Played sick. Ran to the bedroom. 2 seconds is enough. Uncle Han's exhale crackled through the line. If he saw the real you, even for a moment, he reported back. Chen will know you're not what you appear. Marvin's reflection stared back from the window. Expensive silk robe, carefully styled hair, the bruise on his cheek from Vincent's slap blooming purple and yellow. The perfect image of an abused trophy Omega. What do I do? Run or fight, little Phoenix. Those are your only options now. Run where? Marvin's voice cracked. Chen has resources in 12 countries. If he found me in Seoul, he'll find me anywhere. Then you know the answer. Marvin closed his eyes. Master Li's final lesson, written in blood and fire, when cornered, a phoenix doesn't flee. It burns. I can't fight, he whispered. Not yet. I don't know his strength. How many men he has. What he. You're stalling. Uncle Han's voice gentled, the way it had when Marvin was a child struggling with advanced forms. You've been stalling for 7 years, hiding behind that alpha shadow, telling yourself it's survival. But we both know the truth. You're afraid. I'm not. Not of Chen. Of yourself. The old man paused. You're afraid that if you stop pretending to be weak, you'll become what Master Li feared, a weapon without a soul. You're afraid that 7 years of Vincent's abuse has poisoned you, made you cruel. Marvin's breath fogged the glass. His split lip throbbed. What if it has? Then Chen already won. Uncle Han's voice hardened. Listen to me. The silent phoenix wasn't just about killing. It was about protection. Balance. You survived the massacre not to become a victim, but to preserve what Master Li died for. If Chen's here, others will follow. And everyone you've tried to protect by hiding, me, the families of the fallen, anyone who might be leverage, we're all at risk. So I fight. You prepare, Uncle Han corrected. Chen won't strike immediately. He'll watch. Confirm. Build a profile. That gives you time. Time for what? To remember who you are. To choose whether you want to keep being Vincent Kim's punching bag or reclaim your name. A pause. The temple may be gone, Marvin, but the phoenix isn't. You're not broken. You're dormant. But Chen's presence changes everything. Marvin stared at the street below. The black sedan's engine started, pulling away from the curb. Coincidence? Or surveillance rotating shifts? If I fight, he said slowly, Vincent will see. Everyone will see. My cover was always temporary. You knew this. Uncle Han's voice softened again. I won't tell you what to do, little phoenix. Run or fight. Hide or rise. But decide quickly. Because Chen Zhao doesn't waste time, and neither should you. The line went dead. Marvin stood at the window for a long time, the burner phone warm in his palm, watching Seoul wake up beneath him. Somewhere in this city, Chen's operative was filing a report. Somewhere, plans were being made. Surveillance established. A trap prepared. And Marvin had to choose, keep wearing the mask until it suffocated him, or rip it off and face whatever came next. His reflection shifted in the glass. For just a moment, he didn't see the Omega Vincent had married. He saw the disciple Master Li had trained. The survivor. The weapon. The phoenix. His phone buzzed. Vincent, texting from the office. Dinner with the Park group tonight. 7 p.m. Wear the blue suit. Don't embarrass me. Marvin deleted the message and turned from the window. He had 12 hours to decide his future. And a growing certainty that the choice had already been made. The Park group dinner ended at 10:47 p.m. Marvin had survived 3 hours of Vincent's colleagues discussing Omega fertility rates like livestock statistics while he stood silent in the blue suit, smiled when prompted, and ignored the way Dante's eyes tracked his every movement like a predator waiting for weakness. Vincent left with the executives for drinks at a private club. Omega's not invited. Take the car home, he'd said dismissively. I'll get a ride later. Marvin had nodded, grateful for the reprieve, and headed to the underground parking garage alone. The elevator descended into concrete and fluorescent lighting. Level B3, where Vincent's Mercedes waited in its reserved spot, far from the elevator in the executive section. Marvin's heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing in the vast emptiness. The garage was deserted at this hour, most employees gone, security minimal. His instincts prickled. Something was wrong. The air felt different, heavier, charged with anticipation. Marvin's hand slipped into his suit pocket, fingers closing around his keys, the sharp edges positioned between his knuckles. Not a real weapon, but better than nothing. He was 10 feet from the Mercedes when they emerged from behind the concrete pillars. 4 men. Black tactical gear. Faces covered. Moving with synchronized precision that screamed professional training. Chen's assassins. Marvin's body recognized the threat before his mind finished processing. His pulse didn't spike, it steadied, dropping into the cold calm Master Li had drilled into him 10,000 times. Fear clouds judgment. Stillness sharpens the blade. Marvin Chen. The lead assassin's voice was muffled behind his mask. Chen Zhao sends his regards. They expected negotiation. Begging. Maybe a scream. They didn't expect Marvin to move. Second one. Marvin dropped his keys, his body already in motion. The lead assassin lunged, blade flashing in the fluorescent light. Marvin sidestepped, redirected the momentum, used the man's own force to send him crashing into the concrete pillar. Bone met stone with a sickening crack. Second 3. The second assassin came from the left, a garrote wire stretched between his hands. Marvin ducked beneath it, his elbow driving up into the man's solar plexus. Air exploded from the assassin's lungs. Marvin followed with a palm strike to the throat, measured, precise, designed to incapacitate without killing. Second 5. His Omega biology screamed contradictions. His scent glands should have been flooding the air with fear pheromones, the sweet submission that made alphas protective or predatory. Instead, his scent turned sharp and electric, ozone and adrenaline, the biological impossibility of an Omega in combat mode. It confused the attackers, made them hesitate for a fraction of a second. A fraction was all Marvin needed. Second 7. The third assassin pulled a gun. Marvin's staff training took over. He grabbed the nearest object, a car antenna he'd snapped off in passing, and used it like a short staff. He struck the gun hand, swept the assassin's legs, brought the makeshift weapon down on the man's wrist with enough force to shatter bone. The gun clattered away. Second 9. The fourth assassin was smarter. He held back, analyzing, looking for an opening. Marvin didn't give him one. He flowed forward, his movements pure silent phoenix, soft circles hiding explosive strikes. His foot connected with the assassin's knee. The joint bent backward with a wet pop. The man went down screaming. Second 11. The lead assassin had recovered, blood streaming from his broken nose. He came at Marvin with renewed fury, blade low and deadly. Marvin caught his wrist, twisted, used the leverage to flip the man over his hip. The assassin hit the ground hard. Marvin's hand moved to the pressure point beneath the jaw, the first death touch, the one that stopped the heart. He hesitated. Master Li's voice, "We are not murderers. We are guardians." Second 12. Marvin struck a different point, the one that induced unconsciousness for 6 hours. The assassin went limp. Silence crashed over the parking garage. 4 bodies on the ground. 3 unconscious, 1 whimpering and clutching a shattered knee. Marvin stood among them, breathing steady, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder, his carefully styled hair falling into his eyes. The Omega mask was gone. In its place stood the last disciple of the Silent Phoenix Temple, every inch a warrior, his sense still crackling with that impossible sharpness. And then he saw it. The red light blinking in the corner. Security camera, angled perfectly to capture the entire fight. Horror flooded through him. Marvin's eyes snapped to the camera, his mind racing. 12 seconds. The footage would show 12 seconds of an Omega, Vincent Kim's fragile, abused Omega husband, destroying 4 trained assassins with techniques that shouldn't exist outside of legends. He ran to the Mercedes, his hands shaking now, not from fear but from adrenaline crash. The parking garage security feed would upload to the building's server. From there, it would be backed up to the cloud. Accessible to building security, to Vincent's company IT department, too. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Marvin answered with trembling fingers. Impressive, little Phoenix. Uncle Han's voice was tight with worry. But you need to leave. Now. That footage will reach Chen within the hour. And once he knows for certain, he won't send assassins. He'll come himself. The camera. I know. I'm watching the feed remotely. Keys clicking in the background. I can delay it. Corrupt the file. But not erase it. Someone will see, Marvin. Someone always sees. Marvin slumped against the Mercedes, his split lip from Vincent's slap throbbing in time with his heartbeat. 2 violence-marked wounds in 2 days, one from his husband's cruelty, one from his own survival. Let them see, he heard himself say. What? I'm tired of hiding, Uncle. Marvin looked at the unconscious assassins, then at his own reflection in the car window. His eyes were different now, harder, clearer. Let the footage leak. Let it go viral. Let Vincent see who has been hitting. Let Chen know I'm not running anymore. Marvin. 7 years I've been dead. Maybe it's time the Phoenix rose. He ended the call, climbed into the Mercedes, and drove home through Seoul's glittering streets. Behind him, the security camera kept recording. And somewhere in the digital ether, the 12 seconds that would change everything began their inevitable journey toward the light. The video hit the internet at 3:42 a.m. By dawn, it had 17 million views. Mystery Omega destroys armed attackers in 12 seconds. The footage was grainy, the parking garage lighting harsh and unflattering, but the action was unmistakable. 4 armed men. 1 Omega in a torn blue suit. 12 seconds of violence so precise it looked choreographed, except for the very real sound of breaking bones and the assassin's screams echoing off concrete. The comments section exploded. Fake. No way an Omega moves like that. Those are professional fighters getting demolished. What training does this person have? The scent shift at 004, did anyone else catch that? Omegas don't smell like lightning during fights. This is insane. I've watched this 50 times. The technique at 008 is some kind of martial arts I've never seen. Who is this? By 6 a.m., the video had been shared across every major platform. News outlets picked it up. Martial arts forums dissected every movement. Omegaverse advocacy groups debated whether it was empowering or stage propaganda. And in his corner office overlooking downtown Seoul, Vincent Kim watched it for the 37th time. He'd arrived at work early, irritated by a headache and the lingering taste of expensive whiskey from last night's club. Dante had been waiting in his office with coffee and a tablet, his expression carefully neutral. Sir, there's something you need to see. Vincent had expected a market report. A competitor's move. Instead, Dante had pulled up the video. At first, Vincent didn't understand what he was watching. A parking garage. An Omega being attacked. Standard street violence, the kind that happened in bad neighborhoods. Then the Omega moved. Vincent's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. He watched the figure sidestep a knife thrust with liquid grace, redirect a 200-pound man into a concrete pillar with casual efficiency, and disarm a gun-wielding attacker using nothing but a broken car antenna. Where was this filmed? Vincent asked, his voice carefully controlled. The Kim Tower parking garage, Dante said quietly. Level B3. Last night, approximately 10:50 p.m. Vincent's headache sharpened into ice picks behind his eyes. Kim Tower. His building. Level B3, where the executive parking was located. Where he'd sent. His eyes snapped back to the screen. The Omega's build. Slender but not fragile. The torn blue suit jacket. The way the figure moved, efficient and economical, no wasted motion. The blue suit Vincent had told Marvin to wear to the park group dinner. No, Vincent said. But his hands had already started shaking. He rewound the footage, zoomed in on the Omega's face. The angle was wrong, mostly profile and shadow, but the bone structure, the delicate jaw, the sweep of dark hair. Impossible. Sir. Dante's voice cut through the static in Vincent's mind. The timestamp matches when you sent Marvin home from the restaurant. The suit matches what he was wearing. And the parking space in the background, that's your Mercedes. Vincent's world tilted sideways. Marvin. His Marvin. The weak, trembling Omega who apologized for breathing. The husband who'd bled on marble floors and cowered from raised hands. The pathetic creature who needed heat suppressants because his biology was too fragile to function normally. That Marvin had just destroyed 4 armed attackers in 12 seconds. It can't be him, Vincent said, but the word sounded hollow even to himself. Marvin can barely walk in heels without stumbling. He's weak. You've seen him. Everyone's seen him. Have they? Dante moved around the desk, his voice dropping into that smooth, poisonous register he used when planting ideas. Or have they seen what he wanted them to see? Vincent's hands clenched on the tablet. The video played again, that impossible figure moving like water and striking like thunder. At the 7-second mark, the Omega scent visibly changed. Even through grainy footage, you could see the attackers hesitate, confused by the ozone-sharp adrenaline scent that no Omega should produce. He's been lying to you, Dante continued, circling like a shark scenting blood. All this time. The weakness, the trembling, the constant apologies, it was all an act. While you've been building an empire, he's been playing you for a fool. No. But Vincent's certainty crumbled with every repetition. How many times had Marvin flinched from him? How many times had he bowed his head, accepted punishment without fighting back, whispered "I'm sorry" like it was the only phrase he knew? All of it calculated. All of it fake. Think about it, sir. Dante leaned against the desk, his expression sympathetic but his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. An Omega with this kind of training doesn't just appear. This is military-level combat skill. Special forces. Maybe worse. What else has he been hiding? What's his real agenda? Vincent's mind raced. The arranged marriage, facilitated through that discreet broker. Marvin's vague background, orphaned, no family, records conveniently minimal. The way he'd accepted Vincent's proposal without negotiation, without demands for bonding or emotional connection. His trying to sabotage you, Dante had whispered at the anniversary gala, planting the seed that led to the slap. What if it wasn't paranoia? What if Dante had been right all along? He could be corporate espionage, Vincent said slowly, the theory crystallizing with horrifying logic. Sent by a competitor. The weak Omega persona giving him access to my home, my files, my business. Or worse. Dante's voice dropped to a whisper. What if he's dangerous? Those men in the video weren't random muggers, sir. Look at their gear. Tactical equipment. Professional hit squad. And your husband took them apart like it was choreographed. Vincent watched the video again. At the 9-second mark, Marvin's hand moved toward an attacker's throat, then shifted at the last instant to a knockout point instead. Precise. Controlled. Merciful. The movement of someone who'd killed before and chosen not to. Get me everything, Vincent said, his voice hard. Every file on Marvin Chen. Every background check, every reference, every piece of paper from the marriage broker. I want to know who my husband really is. Already compiled, sir. Dante produced a folder from his briefcase, his efficiency almost obscene. I took the liberty when the video first appeared. There are inconsistencies. Vincent opened the folder. Marvin's intake paperwork from 7 years ago stared back at him. Age 23, occupation listed as student, emergency contact listed as none. The background check showed an Omega from a small town, parents deceased, unremarkable educational history. But stapled to the back was a handwritten note from Dante, birth records don't match. Town Hall has no record of Marvin Chen before age 23. Identity appears fabricated. Vincent's blood turned to ice. He's not even who he says he is. No, sir. Dante's smile was razor-thin. Which raises the question, what else has he lied about? And more importantly, what's he planning to do now that his cover is blown? The video played again on loop. 12 seconds. 4 attackers. One impossible Omega who'd spent 7 years pretending to be breakable. Vincent thought about every slap he'd delivered. Every cruel word. Every public humiliation. He thought he was disciplining a weak spouse, maintaining proper hierarchy. But if Marvin wasn't weak, if he'd been capable of fighting back this entire time, why didn't he? The question lodged in Vincent's throat like broken glass. He watched his fragile husband catch a wrist mid-knife thrust, redirect 200 pounds of muscle like it weighed nothing, and move with the deadly grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime training to kill. Marvin could have ended him. Any time in the last 7 years. One wrong move, one slap too many, and Vincent could have been another body on Marvin's count. But he'd never fought back. Never even threatened. Just bled and apologized and played weak. Why? Sir. Dante's voice pulled him back. What do you want to do? Vincent closed the folder, his mind churning with paranoia and wounded pride in something else, something that felt dangerously close to fear. He'll be home by now, Vincent said coldly. I'm going to get answers. And if Marvin Chen, or whoever he really is, thinks he can make a fool of me in my own home, he's about to learn otherwise. He stood, grabbed his coat, and headed for the elevator. Behind him, Dante smiled at the frozen image on the tablet. Marvin, mid-strike, lethal and beautiful and completely, devastatingly real. The unraveling had begun. Marvin was making tea when Vincent came home. It was barely 8 a.m., far too early for his husband to return from the office, but Marvin had heard the elevator ding, smelled Vincent's distinctive cologne mixed with Fuhrer-spiked alpha pheromones, and known, the video had reached him. He continued steeping the jasmine leaves with steady hands, his back to the penthouse entrance, counting Vincent's footsteps across the marble. 8 steps. Stop. The rustle of a coat being discarded with more force than necessary. Marvin. Vincent's voice was acid. Living room. Now. Marvin poured the tea into 2 cups, one for himself, one for Vincent, because habit died hard, and turned. His husband stood in the archway, still in his office suit, his tie loosened, his expression carved from rage and something else. Something that looked dangerously like fear. You saw, Marvin said quietly. Not a question. 17 million people saw. Vincent's hands clenched at his sides. Care to explain what the hell I just watched? Marvin carried both teacups to the living room, set them on the glass coffee table, and sat on the sofa with the same careful grace he'd cultivated for 7 years. The trembling Omega, the obedient spouse. Except now, with the video public, the trembling looked different. Calculated. Controlled. Vincent's rage sharpened. Don't you dare play weak with me. Not now. Not after. He pulled out his phone, pulled up the video, and threw it onto the coffee table between them. The footage played on loop, Marvin destroying 4 armed men in 12 seconds. I'm not playing anything, Marvin said. He picked up his tea, sipped it, and met Vincent's eyes with a steadiness that made his husband take an involuntary step back. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look. Liar. Vincent's voice cracked like a whip. You've been lying since the day we met. The weakness, the trembling, the pathetic Omega act, all of it fake. Dante's right. You're corporate espionage, aren't you? Some competitor planted you. Dante. Marvin's laugh was bitter and sharp. Of course. Let me guess, he's been feeding you theories all morning. How I'm a spy. How I'm here to sabotage your precious company. How I've been playing you for 7 years. Haven't you? Vincent moved closer, his alpha presence flooding the room, trying to dominate through sheer biological pressure. It had always worked before. Marvin would shrink, submit, apologize. Now, Marvin just looked tired. I'm not a spy, Vincent. I'm a survivor. He set down his teacup with deliberate care. Those men in the parking garage were sent to kill me. Not corporate rivals. Not business competitors. Actual assassins, from a past I've spent 7 years running from. Running? Vincent's laugh was ugly. You call this running? You married into wealth, lived in luxury, played the victim while hiding this. He gestured at the video, at Marvin, at the contradiction of everything he thought he knew. I call it surviving, Marvin corrected, his voice dropping to something cold and ancient. I needed to disappear. Needed anonymity. An arranged marriage to a man who viewed Omegas as decorations seemed perfect. You'd never look at me closely enough to see past the mask. The words hit Vincent like physical blows. You used me. Yes. Marvin didn't flinch from the accusation. The same way you used me. Or have you forgotten? You wanted a presentable Omega spouse for business functions. Someone decorative and obedient who wouldn't interfere with your affairs or demand emotional connection. We made a transaction, Vincent. I gave you the image of a proper alpha with a proper Omega. You gave me a place to hide. I gave you everything. Vincent's voice rose, alpha authority bleeding into rage. A home, money, status. You gave me bruises. Marvin's voice remained level, but his eyes blazed. You gave me public humiliation. You gave me a split lip 2 nights ago because I accidentally spilled wine. Don't pretend this was generosity. You kept me because I made you look good and never talked back. Vincent's hand moved before his brain could stop it. The familiar gesture, the backhand slap, the alpha discipline he'd used dozens of times to put his Omega back in place. Marvin caught his wrist mid-swing. The grip was iron. Unyielding. Vincent's forward momentum stopped completely, his arm frozen in midair, and for the first time in 7 years, he felt what real strength looked like. Marvin stood slowly, still holding Vincent's wrist, and the height difference that had always favored the alpha suddenly meant nothing. The Omega who'd cowered and trembled and apologized looked at Vincent with eyes that held temples burning and masters dying in 7 years of swallowed rage. 7 years, Vincent. Marvin's voice was soft, deadly. 7 years I let you pretend you were stronger. Vincent tried to pull his wrist free. It didn't move. He yanked harder, putting his full alpha strength into it, and Marvin's grip didn't even waver. Panic spiked through Vincent's chest, primal and humiliating. Let go. No. Marvin's other hand moved to Vincent's throat, not squeezing, just resting there, fingers positioned over the pulse point with surgical precision. Feel that? Your life, right under my fingers. I could have ended you any time. The first slap. The 10th. Last week when you shoved me into the bathroom mirror. Any time. Vincent's breathing went shallow. This close, he could smell Marvin's scent, still Omega, still fundamentally the same, but laced with that impossible sharpness. Ozone and adrenaline. The scent of a predator wearing prey's clothing. Why didn't you? The question escaped before Vincent could stop it, and he hated how small his voice sounded. Because I'm not a monster. Marvin released Vincent's wrist, but the message was delivered. The power dynamic had shattered like the wine glass 2 nights ago. I came here to hide, not to hurt. I needed you to see me as weak so the people hunting me would never look twice at Vincent Kim's pathetic Omega spouse. Who's hunting you? People who killed my entire family. Marvin stepped back, putting distance between them, and suddenly he looked exhausted. People who burned down the only home I ever knew. People who'll kill anyone I care about if it means getting to me. Vincent rubbed his wrist, red marks already blooming where Marvin's fingers had been. His mind struggled to reconcile 7 years of assumptions with this new reality. The temple. You're from some kind of martial arts. The Silent Phoenix Temple. Marvin's voice cracked on the name. 23 disciples. 4 masters. All dead. I was the only one who escaped. And the video. Means they know I'm alive. Means the anonymity I bought with 7 years of your abuse is gone. Marvin picked up his teacup again, his hands shaking now, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally dropping the mask. So congratulations, Vincent. You wanted to know who I really am? I'm Marvin Chen, last disciple of a dead temple, trained killer hiding as your trophy Omega. And now that secret is viral. Vincent stared at his husband, this stranger wearing Marvin's face, and felt his world tilt beyond recovery. Every slap replayed in his mind, but now with new context. Marvin standing there, taking it, while knowing he could kill with one finger. What happens now? Vincent asked. Marvin met his eyes, and for the first time in their marriage, there was no submission in his gaze. No apology. Just cold, hard truth. Now. Marvin set down his cup. Now you decide if you want to keep pretending you're the alpha in this relationship. Because we both know that was always a lie. The words hung in the air like drawn blades. And for the first time in his life, Vincent Kim had no response. The Spring Investor Gala was Vincent's crown jewel. 200 of Asia's wealthiest business leaders packed into the penthouse's renovated ballroom, champagne flowing, deals worth billions being whispered over canapes. Marvin had dressed in the white silk suit Vincent chose, playing his role one last time, standing at his husband's elbow like a decorative accessory. Except now everyone knew what he was. The whispers followed him like smoke. Executives who'd once ignored him now watched with wary fascination. Omegas who'd pitied him stared with something between awe and fear. The viral video had transformed him from invisible to notorious overnight. Vincent felt it too, the way his colleagues looked at Marvin differently, the way their respect for Vincent had curdled into questions about control and deception. Dante stood nearby, his expression smug, having spent 3 days poisoning every conversation with insinuations about Marvin's true agenda. Marvin endured it all with the same quiet dignity, sipping sparkling water, speaking when spoken to, his mask back in place. But Vincent could see the difference now. The way Marvin's eyes tracked exits. The way his weight distributed on the balls of his feet. The coiled readiness beneath the silk suit. His husband was hunting. At 9:47 p.m., the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the ballroom in red. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vincent's head of security spoke into his radio, his expression darkening. "Sir, we have a breach." The ballroom doors exploded inward. 12 men in black tactical gear poured through, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Not Chen's assassins from the parking garage, these were elites, the kind you hired when standard mercenaries failed. Their leader stepped forward, removing his mask to reveal a scarred face Marvin recognized from 7 years of nightmares. "Hello, little Phoenix." The man's smile was razors. "Chen Zhao sends his regards. And an invitation, come quietly, or we paint this room red." The crowd panicked. Screams erupted. 200 people surged toward the exits, and found them blocked by more armed men. Trapped. Vincent's carefully curated business empire locked in a cage with killers. "Everyone down." Vincent shouted, his alpha voice cutting through hysteria. People dropped to the floor, executives and Omegas alike pressing against marble, hands over heads. Marvin didn't drop. He stepped forward, placing himself between the mercenaries and the crowd, his white silk suit glowing in the emergency lights like a target. "Let them go," Marvin said quietly. "Your quarrel is with me." "Marvin, what the hell?" Vincent grabbed his arm, but Marvin shook him off with casual strength. "Stay down, Vincent. All of you, stay down." The lead mercenary laughed. "The Omega thinks he's a hero. Chen warned me you'd gone soft, hiding behind weakness. But you're still going to die. The only question is how many corpses you want around you when you do." "None." Marvin's hands moved to his bow tie, loosening it with deliberate slowness. Then his jacket, shrugging it off to reveal the white dress shirt beneath. His suppressant patches were visible on his throat, his wrists, 7 years of chemical chains. He ripped them off one by one. The change was immediate. Marvin's scent exploded into the room, no longer the muted, sickly sweet Omega fragrance, but something wild and electric. His pupils dilated. His breathing deepened. The biological suppression he'd maintained for 7 years shattered, and the Omega beneath, the real Omega, the one shaped by temple training and survival, emerged like a phoenix from ashes. "Last warning," Marvin said. "Leave, or I put you down." The mercenaries attacked. Marvin moved like water catching fire. The first mercenary swung a baton. Marvin caught it mid-swing, twisted the man's wrist until bones cracked, and used the stolen baton to block the second attacker's knife. He flowed between opponents, his movements the perfected forms he'd practiced every night at 3 a.m., no longer hidden or restrained. Vincent watched from the floor, his mind unable to process what his eyes saw. This wasn't the Omega who'd cowered from his slaps. This was a weapon wearing his husband's face, moving with speed and precision that made the parking garage video look like rehearsal. 3 mercenaries down in 20 seconds. 4 more pressed forward. Marvin didn't retreat, he advanced, driving into their formation, using their numbers against them. A sweeping kick collapsed one man's knee. An elbow strike to another's temple. He caught a third man's punch and redirected it into the fourth's jaw. The crowd watched in stunned silence, 200 witnesses to the death of every assumption they'd ever made about Omega biology. Then the champion emerged. He was massive, 6 feet 4 inches, 240 pounds of solid muscle, moving with the practiced grace of a martial arts master. The other mercenaries fell back, giving him space. This was Chen's final card, the elite fighter sent to retrieve Marvin alive or end him permanently. Master Li's last student. The champion's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I trained at the Iron Fist Monastery. Destroyed 3 temples before yours. Chen promised me a worthy opponent if I brought you in. Then come find out, Marvin said, and his voice carried across the ballroom like a blade being drawn. They met in the center of the floor, the crowd pressed against walls, Vincent frozen at his position, watching his husband face down a man twice his size. The champion struck first, a devastating palm strike meant to shatter ribs. Marvin redirected it, used the momentum to slip inside the champion's guard, drove his knee into the man's thigh muscle. The champion barely flinched. He grabbed for Marvin's throat with hands like vices. Marvin dropped low, swept the champion's legs, and the big man went down hard, his trained reflexes no match for Silent Phoenix technique. But he rolled immediately, came up swinging, his fist connecting with Marvin's cheek with a crack that made the crowd gasp. Blood bloomed from Marvin's lip, the same lip Vincent had split 2 nights ago. But Marvin didn't falter. He spat blood, smiled with red teeth, and attacked. The fight that followed rewrote Vincent's understanding of reality. Marvin flowed around the champion's power, turned brutal strength into vulnerabilities, struck pressure points with surgical precision. The champion responded with raw skill, decades of training versus Marvin's lethal artistry. They crashed through tables, shattered crystal, turned the elegant ballroom into a battlefield. And through it all, Marvin's scent burned bright, not submission, not fear, but pure Omega ferocity, a biological impossibility that existed because Marvin willed it to exist. The champion caught Marvin in a crushing hold, lifting him off his feet. For one horrible moment, Vincent thought it was over. Marvin struck the 5 death touches in rapid succession. Pressure points beneath the ribs, at the solar plexus, along the spine, the throat, and finally the cluster of nerves behind the ear. The champion's grip loosened. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed like a felled tree. Silence. Marvin stood over the unconscious champion, breathing hard, his white shirt torn and blood-stained, his hair fallen from its careful styling, his body trembling from exertion and unleashed biology. 200 people stared at the Omega who'd just saved their lives. And Vincent saw, truly saw for the first time, who he'd married. Not a decoration. Not a victim. A warrior. A phoenix. A myth made flesh. Marvin looked directly at Vincent across the destroyed ballroom, and in his eyes was a question. Do you see me now? Vincent did. Finally, impossibly, he saw. The police arrived 18 minutes after the siege ended, followed by ambulances, news crews, and government officials who suddenly cared very much about an underworld kingpin operating in Seoul. Chen Zhao's mercenaries were arrested on site, charged with attempted murder, terrorism, and a list of crimes that would keep prosecutors busy for years. The champion, still unconscious from Marvin's 5 death touches, was carried out on a stretcher, his vital signs stable but his pride thoroughly destroyed. Chen Zhao himself was captured 3 hours later, trying to flee to Beijing. The authorities had been building a case against him for years, and Marvin's testimony, combined with the very public attack on 200 witnesses, gave them everything they needed. The man who'd slaughtered the Silent Phoenix Temple would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison. Master Li was finally avenged. Marvin gave his statement to police in the penthouse, still wearing his torn, blood-stained white suit, his voice steady as he recounted 7 years of hiding, the temple massacre, the parking garage ambush, and tonight's assault. The detectives listened with expressions that shifted from skepticism to horror to reluctant respect. Vincent sat across the room, watching his husband transform from mysterious Omega to key witness to survivor of a tragedy that predated their marriage. Every word Marvin spoke rewrote their history, exposed the lies Vincent had told himself, and shattered the comfortable narrative of alpha dominance. By the time the sun rose over Seoul, the penthouse had emptied. The guests had been released, traumatized but alive. The crime scene teams had finished. The news crews had been forcibly removed by Vincent's security. Only Vincent and Marvin remained, standing in the destroyed ballroom amid broken crystal and bloodstains, the silence between them heavier than any words. "You saved them," Vincent said finally. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual authority. 200 people. You could have run. Could have let Chen's men tear through everyone to get to you. But you stayed. Of course I stayed. Marvin's tone was flat, exhausted. That's what Guardians do. It's what the Silent Phoenix taught. Protect the innocent, even at cost to yourself. I didn't know. Vincent took a step closer, his hands shaking. All this time, I didn't. Marvin, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. The things I said, the way I treated you, if I'd known. If you'd known, what? Marvin turned to face him, and his eyes were ancient with grief. You would have treated me better? You would have respected me? Vincent, that's the problem. You only care now because you saw what I can do. Because I'm not weak anymore in your eyes. No, that's not. It is. Marvin's voice cracked. For 7 years, you believed I was weak, and you punished me for it. You slapped me. You mocked me. You paraded me at dinners like a trained pet. And I let you, because I needed to hide, because survival meant swallowing my pride and playing the victim you expected. Vincent's face crumpled. The Alpha CEO, the billion-dollar empire builder, looked like he was breaking apart. I was wrong. Everything I did was wrong. But I can change. We can start over. I'll be better, I swear. You'll what? Marvin's laugh was bitter. Love me? Respect me? Vincent, you can't love someone you never bothered to know. You loved the idea of a weak Omega who made you feel powerful. You never wanted me. That's not true. Isn't it? Marvin pulled off his torn jacket, let it fall to the floor. When did you ever ask about my life before we married? My dreams? My fears? You never wanted to know, because knowing would have required seeing me as a person instead of a possession. Vincent reached for him, his alpha instinct screaming to fix this, to dominate this situation back under control. Please. Give me a chance to prove. Marvin caught his wrist, not violently this time, but firmly. The same grip from 3 days ago, when everything had shattered between them. No, Vincent. We're done. Marvin. I'm filing for divorce. The words hit Vincent like physical blows. He staggered back, his face going white. You can't, we're bonded. We're not bonded, Marvin corrected quietly. You never wanted a bond. You wanted a contract, and contracts can be dissolved. He released Vincent's wrist. My lawyer will contact yours. I'm not asking for much, just enough to start over. I'll give you everything, Vincent said desperately. The penthouse, money, whatever you need. I don't want your guilt money. Marvin moved toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where he'd spent 7 years suffocating. I want my life back. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Vincent's lawyers tried to fight it, but Marvin had Uncle Han's help, and documentation of every injury, every humiliation, every instance of abuse witnessed by household staff who'd been too afraid to speak up. The settlement was generous but not extravagant, enough for Marvin to build something new. Vincent signed the papers in his office, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. Across the conference table, Marvin sat composed in simple clothes, jeans and a sweater, no designer labels, no silk suits. He looked younger somehow, lighter, like shedding the marriage had lifted years from his shoulders. I loved you, Vincent said as Marvin gathered the signed documents. Maybe not the right way, maybe not enough, but I did. Marvin paused at the door. For a moment, his expression softened with something that might have been pity. I know. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies and hierarchy and one person always kneeling. What will you do now? Marvin smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time Vincent could remember. I'm going to teach. The Silent Phoenix Academy opened 6 months later in the mountains outside Jeonju, a renovated temple complex that had once housed monks and now welcomed something different, Omega youth who'd been told their entire lives they were weak. Marvin used his settlement to fund everything, renovations, equipment, scholarships for students who couldn't afford tuition. Uncle Han helped with curriculum, teaching alongside Marvin, passing on techniques that had nearly died with their temple. The students came slowly at first, Omegas from abusive homes, from restrictive families, from lives that had taught them submission was survival. Marvin taught them what Master Li had taught him, that strength wasn't biology, that power came from discipline, and that an Omega could be both gentle and lethal. The viral video helped recruitment. Every Omega who'd seen Marvin destroy Chen's champion, who'd watched an Omega protect 200 people through pure skill, arrived at the temple with the same question: "Can you teach me to be like you?" Marvin's answer was always the same: "I can teach you to be yourself. The rest is up to you." The academy thrived. News outlets called it revolutionary. Omegaverse advocacy groups praised it. Traditional alphas condemned it as dangerous, as disrupting natural hierarchy. Marvin didn't care. He taught his students the 12 forms, the pressure points, the meditation techniques that turned fear into focus. He taught them that weakness was sometimes a choice, a strategy, a disguise, but never an inevitability. And at night, when the students slept and the temple was quiet, Marvin would stand on the mountain overlook and think about Vincent. Sometimes he wondered if his ex-husband had learned anything. If the viral video and the divorce had cracked open Vincent's worldview, made him see Omegas differently. Uncle Han reported that Vincent had fired Dante, that the company had implemented new Omega protection policies, that Vincent himself had been photographed at Omega Rights fundraisers. Maybe he'd changed. Maybe he'd learned. It didn't matter. That chapter of Marvin's life was closed. 1 year after the divorce, a package arrived at the academy. No return address, but Marvin recognized Vincent's handwriting on the label. Inside was a single item, the jade seal of the Silent Phoenix Temple, the one Master Li had pressed into Marvin's hand 7 years ago as the temple burned. The one Marvin had left behind in the penthouse when he'd moved out, too painful to carry. A note accompanied it, brief and precise in Vincent's corporate script. "This belongs with the Phoenix, not the cage. I'm sorry I didn't understand that sooner. V." Marvin held the jade seal, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. Master Li had told him to survive, to let the fire inside burn cold and patient until the time came to rise. The time had come. Marvin placed the seal in the academy's main hall, beneath a portrait of Master Li and the 23 disciples who died protecting their legacy. Students would pass it every day, would learn its history, would understand what they were inheriting. The Silent Phoenix Temple was gone. But its teachings lived on, in every student who learned to stand tall, every Omega who discovered their strength, every person who understood that biology was not destiny. Marvin stood on the mountain that evening and watched the sun set over Jianzhu. No more suppressants. No more trembling. No more masks. Just him, Marvin Chen, last disciple, first teacher, the phoenix who'd burned down to ashes and risen alone. He smiled and turned back toward the temple, where his students waited. Master Li would have been proud.